Tonight I have a friend of mine. He is one of the hosts of Unsolved Reservation Mysteries, or I guess the official title is Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservation. You can find his show on YouTube, TikTok. What are all you guys on?
Well, I think we're on everything.
Everything, yeah.
Yeah,
Spotify. They're on.
Facebook, you name it. We're
Yeah,
on. We're even on some walls in the restrooms. Nah, yeah, on
yeah.
the highway and turnpike.
All right. So here we have Chris Honkv Hill, the only man to ever snag a deer woman and live to tell the tale. Young elder himself, Chris Honkv Hill. Can you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell me about yourself.
Well, first of all, I want to say, Hische, it's don't go.
Mm.
I want to thank you for having me here. I'm a big fan of you
Hey, I
guys.
appreciate it.
All the short films that you guys do
Thank
and your
you.
podcast. I think you guys are doing an awesome job.
Mm.
Even I went to one of your film nights.
Yeah, one of our screenings, one of our movie nights.
And
Yeah.
I've just blown away with all the things that you guys do there.
Thank you.
And so, again, a little bit about myself. Uh, my name is Christopher Hill. They call me Christopher Honka Hill.
What does a honka mean?
Honka means kind of a monster in Muskogee Creek.
Okay, all right. So it's a nickname. Did you come up with it yourself, or?
No, it's an old name. A lot of elders, they talk about when they start talking about stories like that, they'll call them honka stories.
Ooh,
And so, those are what they call like you would say monster. Now, when they're talking about ghost stories, they say Boavicha. People today, they get them kind of confused, but again, you just kind of got to know that. But for right now, everybody's kind of using honka as general as ghosts that cover everything.
Ghost
But
monsters, cryptids, you name it. All right.
you name it, the scary ones, that's what they call a honka.
Where'd you grow up, Chris?
I grew up in Okmulgee, Oklahoma, and of course, I grew up around the ceremonial grounds and the churches, in the Creek country. They're all spread out through Creek country, Creek and Seminole country, and my father, he was a minister, but yet, he used to travel a lot. He met a lot of different tribes, and that I always talk about my traveling when I was young. My dad was that minister, and this was like a long time ago. And when all these natives, they were more fluent than they are today. You had a lot more fluent speakers, and so I was truly blessed to see and hear a lot of stories from a lot of different tribes as a young man. A little kid on up. And so I was always around that, and that's what I always get my fascination with these spooky stories, especially from other tribes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's just a little bit about me, I guess.
Okay, so you grew up in Okmulgee and you're Muskogee Creek.
Yes.
Any other tribes mixed in there?
No, I'm full blood Muskogee. But I do have Seminole relatives. You have to understand. Indians, we got relatives like that. I got Cherokee relatives, Seminole relatives, and
Where the Muskogee Creek people from initially before Oklahoma?
of course, the Florida, Alabama, Georgia area. They were originally from there, and so a lot of our traditional stories still come from that way. When they talk about old stories, that's kind of the background on those stories. You got to understand that's where they all originated from, and so. I know on our podcast, some of these old stories, especially like water monsters and these wood spirits, I'm talking about our old lands, back there, and so, of course, like the Florida Seminoles, the Miccosukkees, the Oklahoma Seminoles, the Creeks, even the Cherokees and the Uchis, we all got the same kind of, beings and stories. So that's kind of a lot of what I talk about, on the podcast.
Yeah. So from what I've noticed, the Kiowas we're a Plains tribe. And initially, my people are from Montana, and then back in the 1800s, the Indian Removal Act, we part of our tribe was moved to Oklahoma. And what's crazy is the Montana Kiowas and the Oklahoma Kiowas. We have different customs, even though we're the same people. There's 200 years of different stories and um, practices and stuff like that that are different. And so we kind of split off into our own ways. And just dancing at powwows and stuff like that. And a lot of the customs that we have like now are things that just happened over the past 150 years. For example, we wear our bandoliers over our shoulders when we dance for the Kiowa Gourd clan, and initially that was inspired by these Kiowa warriors seeing um, these Mexican soldiers, and they'd have those bullets, thrown over their shoulders, and they thought it looked cool, and they're like, we're gonna make something like that. And so, they would put some beads and some bones, and they'd make those bandoliers across their shoulders, and that was incorporated now into their regalia, and that's not necessarily what they did back in Montana. So there's still, yeah, we split off into our own directions, and so now we have different stories. All that to say, tribes in the plains lands here in the middle of the heartland of America, we have similar customs, similar stories. We all heard stories about Deer Woman and Little People, as I'm sure you guys did too. But there's still a lot of stories that match up like pretty close. I've got some friends in Montana, and they're Crow, and their stories, they've never been to Oklahoma. I've never been to Montana, and their stories like are so eerily similar. I'm like, man, that is crazy. That's 200 years of separation, but our stories are still very similar.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool seeing that these regions of tribes, they still share very similar stories, and I think that's one of the reasons why our people are so strong is that we're some of the original storytellers, and storytelling is so strong in our culture, and it still is today. Obviously, we both have podcasts telling scary stories and just stories in general. But even me, like I'm a storyteller, I'm a writer, and I want to tell my stories through film, and in podcasts as well. But
Which you do an awesome job
thank
with.
you. I appreciate that. And so that is literally just another form of storytelling because I grew up hearing stories. So it's really cool, and that's all just because we're Indians, we're native.
Yeah.
So man, it's really cool seeing that there are other people out here doing the same thing. And because I didn't hear stories like this from my friends' families or anything like that. They didn't just sit around the fire, tell stories. So it's really cool seeing that you guys are doing the same thing as we are, more successfully, but we're on our way. You know what I'm saying?
You know, I'm glad you kind of brought up that history, between the Kiowas and the Crows. That was, something, I kind of learned up, at an early age. And I actually was blessed to, go work up at Crow Agency when I was younger, so I kind of learned that, you guys were kind of similar, or the same, came from had that same history, I guess. And, they got stories, and I've always even been told that there was Kiowas that was up in Canada, at one time, and they roamed all through that area.
Absolutely.
And so, some of their stories also relate to some of those Canadian stories. And I thought, man, those are some wicked stories, and so. I think to me that's really fascinating. I love that kind of stuff. The thing that I don't remember exactly how it goes, but maybe you might know it more. I remember hearing the original story of the hand game. It has to deal with spirits. That starting song, I was told, it talks about a spirit or a ghost. And those crows up that way, man, they take that hand game to a whole new level. And my understanding, the Kiowas always go up there in a visitation and they play them.
They challenge them, yeah.
Yeah.
So for the listeners, if you're not familiar with some native culture, there's this thing called hand games, and the nickname for hand games is called the games of death. And there's still some tribes that that aren't necessarily like, Christians, but there are some people, some Crows, some Kiowas, and they will meet and have these what are called hand games. And a simplified version of hand game would be like, say you have something in your hand and you put it behind your back and you say which hand is it in. I'm not sure what the end game is that. Like, do you win money with that? What initially was it for?
I think my understanding a long time ago,
Mm,
they played for, furs and,
yeah.
important things.
It's
But,
basically gambling, but there is trickery involved,
yeah.
and it's primarily played with, I mean, Medicine Man. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's I was getting ready to say.
Yeah.
The thing I liked about being up there,
Mm,
they really talk about using that medicine during
mm,
those hand games,
yeah.
and so yeah, I always thought that was fascinating. You had those guys, and they would
Mm,
say, they prepared themselves when
mm.
they used to play, and man,
Yeah, we'll cut in a little video of some hand games. I'm not sure how old those games are, but from my friends up there in Montana, they were telling me that their grandmother told them to never go to the hand games because anytime the hand games are around, death follows, and it's people who are usually near death, that it'll bring death to the area. And if you participate in the hand games, you're playing a risky game. You're inviting these spirits, you're inviting death into your family and into your village.
yeah,
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about all that stuff, but from what I can tell, there's a lot of trickery involved, and these medicine men, they would do this to try to outsmart each other, beat each other with their wits, but also like, yeah, there would be things involved like exchanging pelts and other goods like that. So, I mean, of course, there are going to be some people who take it too far and try to incorporate some magic and stuff like that, and who are going to curse the people who that they lose to.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that you hear stories like that.
Mm.
Somebody got Jay. Someone that could really whoop it on them,
Yeah.
and then they take it to that one level too far. And there's other tribes that play a version of hand games that are
Mm.
just as competitive
Yeah.
and can be also as brutal.
Yeah.
They some sing with the hand drum, some sing with the big
Mm.
drum, some put these poles on the ground and they hit sticks on them to make that rhythm, sing the songs.
Mm.
I think the Ho Chunks, they got what they call a moccasin game.
All right.
Yeah, and it's kind of just like hand game, but
Mm.
they use blankets and stuff
Mm.
to hide underneath their
Interesting.
hands, and you got Navajos that play a version of hand game,
Interesting.
and so you got all these tribes that have kind of a creation story of that
Mm.
hand game. But if you listen to them, they all talk about spirits,
Mm.
uh, supernatural abilities,
Oh yeah, I believe it.
and the ultimate, which is witching. So, to me, I mean, you talk about hand games, you know, I don't know how you say, the tribal way could get super serious.
Yeah.
Now, my understanding here in Oklahoma, most of them just play for benefit
Yeah,
or
play for fun.
fun, for birthdays,
Mm.
But you take it up to Crow Agency, you better get ready because
Yeah,
those
for real.
guys,
You better be prayed up.
oh
Bring
no,
that cedar.
those guys all
Get
show
ready.
up and sing ribbon shirt, and I mean they take it to a whole new
Yeah, like their
level.
jerseys,
I know
those
that,
ribbon jerseys.
yeah.
Yo, God,
Man, they get brutal on it,
I
and
bet, man.
they'll go all night playing that. I
Well,
mean, it's serious, but again, if you hear those kind of
mm,
stories, people, they don't. I don't know, they maybe they don't believe or do believe or
mm,
what, but to me, that's part of our
mm,
ceremonies. No matter what tribe you're from,
absolutely, yeah.
that's we always on our podcast we're always talking about these not so good spirits,
Mm-hmm,
or witching people,
mm,
but this is kind of a how you say a spirit or a ghost that, you know, also could be used evil, but nowadays they kind of bring that good spirit, you know, especially for these Oklahoma games. And so to me, that's I like hearing those kind of stories, you know, especially those old ones. And so, you know, sometimes that made or broke a tribe, you know, those hand games. So, you know, that was always super interesting.
Yeah, I feel like I could talk to you for a long time just asking you questions about certain things. But we are here to hear some scary stories. Um, so real quick, and I'm not sure if this is something that's too taboo for you to talk about, but what's some like crazy medicine man stories that you can name off the top of your head?
No, those medicine man
Mm,
stories, you know, that's, I'm not saying they're taboo, but, you know, a lot
mm,
of times they're super long.
I got you.
Got a lot of history to them because,
Hmm.
you know, for maybe non-native or somebody that hasn't grown up like that, there's a lot of stuff that goes along with those stories. You
Hmm.
know, I always hear, you know, especially here in Creek Country, you know, the word Stigini, you know,
Yeah.
or, you know, things like that, you know, and, you know, that to me, you know, you talk about, I don't know how you say the negative things or you know, because those are all, how you say, medicine man's ability, you know, to shapeshift. And there was a way to do those things. And nowadays, you know, it's used in a negative way, but originally they were started as survival tools.
Yeah.
You know, if you were gonna go traveling through maybe enemy
Mm.
territory, you know, you could shapeshift into whatever animal you wanted, even smoke or just be
Really?
invisible.
Really?
You know, and but now they say if those guys go invisible, they're gonna be scratching people up.
God.
Then they're gonna be getting sick and, you know, dying. You
Hmm.
know, and so there's stories like that. You know, I go to a lot of these conferences
Hmm.
and stuff, and even like today, I attended a conference there in Norman.
Mm.
On break, everybody come racing to me and, you know, telling me their story, and this,
Dang, trying to get on the
oh,
show,
I
huh? Get
guess,
that shout out,
and
huh?
this one individual told me, you know, he's been dreaming of things,
No,
you
yeah.
know, negative things. He keeps
Oof.
seeing this dog come into his home,
Mm.
and it just growls at him and it terrifies him. It makes him so scared, you
Mm.
know, he can't even move. And the way he explains this to me, it sounds kind of like paralysis, you know, that
Sleep
sleep
paralysis, yeah.
paralysis. But, you know, he knows it's a dog. He said what scares him where he doesn't want to move is because he thinks the thing's going to bite him.
Mm.
And then when he wakes up, he has scratches all over him.
Mm.
And he actually showed me those scratches
Wow.
today. And they they were definitely some deep scratches, you know. And of course, you know, me being Creek, you know, we've got 1,000 ways to die, you
God.
know, 1,000 ways to witch somebody. But, you know, the only thing I could tell this individual was you might want to go see somebody
Yeah.
because, you know, when you start getting those scratches, you know, you're going to start getting sick, and then pretty soon you're going to be no more.
Mm.
And so, you know, you talk about witching stories,
Mm.
you know, that was one that was, you know, that was told to me today, you
Mm.
know, and to me, for me, it's scary because I understand everything that goes along with
Yeah.
it. You know, maybe the listeners may not all this, oh, it might just be him scratching himself or,
Sure.
you know, something like that. But when you scratch yourself, you don't get sick,
Yeah.
you know, and when you start, you know, getting sick and start seeing things while you're
Mm.
awake and you're hearing
Mm.
things, you know, that's not natural.
Yeah.
So, you know, otherwise, I just say put a band aid and Neosporin on it.
Gotcha.
But, you know,
So you think that might be like a spiritual attack from some bad medicine?
yeah, I mean, if I would have visited with him, he probably would have told me, you know, he might have had a
Those things.
conflict with, you
Mm.
know, maybe another person or worse. You know, it might have been a female.
I was gonna say some X or something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
so that's like common in Creek and Seminole
Okay.
country. You know, you make the wrong people mad, and somebody's grandma or auntie's gonna be coming at you. You know, so you better come correct. So you know, those are some common things. You know, and you'll hear stories like that. You know, not only that, but you know, again, I've been able to travel, you know, a lot, and you know, some of these dances, you know, especially when I was younger, you know, I'd go up north, you know, visit these northern tribes, you know, and during this time, you know, you still had, you know, pretty fluent people at that time, and you had medicine people, real medicine people at this time. You know, and I would hear stories of them, what you call shooting hares at people. You know, and that means that, you know, this guy, he knows medicine so well, he can blow a hair and it'll hit you wherever it hits. It basically gonna make you, it can either make you bleed to death or it can make you so sick you're gonna die in a few days. And, you know, you would hear that, you know, when they started kind of getting that Pan American, you know, powwow theme going around where everybody's starting to contest. You know, before that, you know, they didn't really contest like they do today. You know, it was more ceremonial, kind of like what you guys have at, you know, Black Leggings Society or, you know, Osage Country. They have those kind of dances down that way. You know, they weren't for money. They were for to honor someone or to send someone off, you know, or, you know, celebrate somebody coming home from the military, you know, and, you know, those kind of things weren't really common till you started putting that money on the line. And you know, again, you know, back then you would hear a lot of stories where they made someone that was maybe a prominent dancer, you know, they got crippled up, you know, or you know, stuff like that. So when you ask about witchcraft or witching somebody stories, those are the kind of things that kind of pop in my head, you know, and so, you know, those are, to me, are pretty scary. I don't know, might not be scary to the listener because they might not know that much.
I mean, that's like for us and our people, you know, we just have to watch our steps. You know, we have to watch everything we say. We have to be mindful and respectful to everyone we're around, you know, because, you know, one bad move, man, you're gonna get jinxed, you know.
Get dealt with. I even hear that, you know, I used to hear that about singers too. You know, singers, you know, they've always been kind of competitive with one another, and you know,
Yeah, of course.
especially these Plains Indians. You know, you'd hear somebody get choked up at the drum, or they would forget a song and they would say somebody's witching you, you know, or you know, you just got dealt with.
Well, yeah, man. If you're their head singer, man, you're the hottest man at the powwow for real. You're out there.
So, you know, you'll hear stories every now and then like that. But, you know, again, a lot of these guys are young and I don't know, maybe that kind of way has been lost. I don't know.
Interesting. My my dad's uncle, which is my grandpa, you know, we in Indian culture we don't say like great uncle, you know, great nephew, anything like that. You know, it's grandfather, grandma, grandson. And so my cone, my grandfather, he's a medicine man. He's older now, but he definitely had his time, you know, when he was was out there doing medicine, good and not so good. And which I didn't know about this till maybe like 2 years ago. But when I was a kid, my we lived in what was called the IV, and in Tecumseh, it's the Indian village, which was like small, maybe 100 houses on it, but it was low income native housing in the middle of this little white town. And so we lived there for 15 years. But when I was a kid, I must have been 8 or 9, our house got broken into, and my dad's regalia. which had eagle feathers on it that were hundreds of years old. It was all stolen. And my dad, where we called the police, they did a whole full investigation. They couldn't find anything except for some footprints, in the mud in the back of the house, before they broke in. And I think we were out of town, might have been camping or something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but they must have known that we were going out of town. So we figured it was one of our neighbors. My dad thinks he was our next door neighbor because, they had some arguments or whatever, some stare downs or something like that. I don't know exactly, but yeah, he called up his uncle, my grandpa, and he came down and he fixed that family, man. The head of the household, which of course they never found any evidence or whatever, but the head of the household, man, he went to prison for life or something after that, within, not very long, and their family fell apart. And I'm not saying that he deserved it or anything like that, but if you're messing with the wrong families, you're gonna get fixed, as my dad says. And if you're native, man, you gotta watch what you're saying, watch what you're doing, because you never know who's got that power, And yeah, it's crazy. I just heard that like 2 years ago. I was like, for real? He's like, yeah, son, we have magic in our blood. I'm like Harry Potter? God, where's my letter for Hogwarts?
Yeah, I'm glad you kind of brought that up because those old ones used to say, I don't care what tribe you belong to, they would all say the same thing. You do evil, you practice an evil, it's always going to come back on you.
Absolutely.
They say, if you think you're going to run the show on this stuff, you're going to be sadly mistaken. Yeah, you might get somebody, but eventually you're going to pay for that. Whether it's in this life or the next. And, again, that was across the board. With any tribe out there, they would say, if you're doing bad, you're going to get it one of these days. So, that was something that, they would always say. Maybe you get mad and you want to witch somebody. They say, well, is it worth your family? Because, sooner or later it's going to come back on you. And it could be one of your relatives or your ones that haven't been born yet. So, those are the kind of things you got to think about. They used to tell people, when they wanted to get somebody witched. So, I don't know, again, those are old stories, that you don't hear very much anymore. So.
Interesting. Well, thanks for, telling me a little bit about that. I mean, I feel like it's hard to hear stories about medicine and medicine men and stuff like that because, it's a little taboo, but also these elders don't want you to start messing with it and stuff like that, and or look too deep into it. Going back to Harry Potter, it's like asking questions about the dark arts or the Horcruxes or whatever, because then you can be like, I got to figure out more about this, and I feel like that's something that some of those things are, better. I bet this is gonna be hard to explain, but that are probably going to be better when they die off with some of these elders. Some of that bad medicine and those practices and that knowledge. You know what I mean? And so I feel like a lot of elders they might be hiding those some particular stories that they feel like should probably die with them. Do you feel that?
Okay. We've talked about this on our podcast. And the thing that, kind of scares me, is that you have all these new age people, they're going to these, what you call black magic stores and getting those books, and some of these, they can be super scary too. Cause one, they're conjuring up these evil entities, and one, either they'll get scared of it or they just don't think it works. And then it runs wild. So, again, I don't know. I'd rather stick to that old belief, if you're going to do that, then do it. Do it full force. Don't be crying around when it when it turns on you. Don't go ask for help. Be a man and, take your punishment. Once you've unleashed it, then deal with it. But too many of them, they'll say, "Oh, I gotta go see medicine man. Why? Because I was doing this, and I was doing that. Now I need help." But no, you better just sit down, and just take it. But that's me. But our Creator, He's loving and understanding. He'll help you out, but you still gonna have to pay for those evil things that you did. So. But anyway, dang, what's that? No. Something agreed with me out there.
That's a neighborhood cat. Hopefully.
That cat gave me a shout out like that. I said, dang, I must be talking right. No.
Yeah, for real. All right, so let's dive in. I don't know, some of that was a little spooky, but I'm trying to hear some scary stories, man. Tell me these scary stories, man. What's the scariest thing that has happened to you? I know that's a loaded question. I'm gonna have to dig deep.
Let me just say this. I've been doing these spooky story events, lately, here in Oklahoma.
I know. I was really trying to get out to them, but our October, man, it was so busy, and I'm sorry. I wanted to come out to them, but when life slows down a little bit, we're definitely trying to come out and tell some stories and hang out with you guys, and maybe win that scary story prize.
So you have to remember Uncle.
Yeah, right.
No, I'm just kidding. But no, what I was gonna say, to answer your question, at these events, we talk about these supernatural beings, and I constantly say, you could talk about these things, you're gonna bring them, if you name them. And so, with that being said, I just went to California just recently, and I went to this place. I can't even remember the name of it, but I put a video on my Instagram. And at Okmulgee, well, actually at Eufaula and Okmulgee, we talked about this entity. We talked about, how it comes out and it'll circle the house, and it looks like a black shadow. And so, I told people, I'm gonna tell you the name of it. You get the golden apple today, but I would suggest don't be spreading that out anywhere. But I had one young man, ask me, said, "Are those things real?" And so, when I told that story, I said, this entity, it goes around abandoned houses or houses that people don't live. Well, this house that I went and visited, they talked about this black shadow that shows up, and it night or day, it'll show up. And anyway, I think I caught it, manifesting, in the yard, but then again, it could have been the sunlight, it could have been anything. But, me being Creek, I can't help but say,
it could be it.
That could be
And
it.
and that's the theme with our podcast, and I do think that you should think logically about evidence and think of the possibilities. But if you suspend disbelief and you think of all the possibilities, could that have possibly been that shadow spirit? Absolutely.
What's the coincidence that I would see something like that? And this was like during the daytime when I was out there. Another thing I was freaked out about that house is when I got there, they kept telling me to go look around, take pictures, because they got a lot of activity there. But what freaked me out was they had a bunch of snakes in that yard.
What?
I mean,
Snakes? Like snakes?
Like snakes.
What?
In this part of California, they say, well, you don't really have to worry about this kind of snake, but you have to worry about this sidewinder snake. He's poisonous. Said if you see a sidewinder, that's the one you got to be careful. Well, I'm seeing a yard full of snakes, and I ain't determined which one is friendly, which one ain't.
You gotta get close enough to see, like, no, that ain't a sidewinder.
But again, me being native and me being Creek, seeing all those snakes, hanging around a yard isn't natural. To me, it's like, have you ever heard of Farm of Snakes? I haven't. but but I mean, I'm not saying
that doesn't sound natural to me at all,
I'm not
man.
saying that there aren't farms of snakes, people farming snakes. I don't know, maybe they do, but when I saw that, there was no way I was gonna go in that yard. A lot of those pictures you see, I'm outside the fence because I didn't want to step where all those snakes were.
Yeah.
And but I did, take pictures. I went inside, you know, and I did see a shadow in that place. Now again, like I was saying, I had just had two big events that I had thought about, or I did, and we talked about that entity. How coincidence would that be? Now, I don't want to say this part, but I'll say it anyway. I had two more events scheduled for this weekend when I came back. Both of those were canceled due to people.
Death in family, right?
Yeah, death in family. And to me, it's like, and not only mentioning that, but I did have something follow.
Separate families, or were these?
Yeah.
Was this one? Oh, you're kidding me!
Yeah.
These were two different deaths, two different
What's
families.
the coincidence of that? And get this, when I went back to my room, I had something in there. It was moving things around. It was playing with the lights. And right off the get go, I had that, how you say, that eerie feeling. I mean, I just knew it wasn't right. And so, I have things that I do to kind of help me out during those things. Even talking about it right now kind of flipping me out. But, because I'm putting one and one together and I'm thinking about those things. I said, dang, how close did I get, to this thing? But, those creeks, when we talk about this specific entity, that's what that thing does. And I explained that at Okmulgee and at Eufaula. So, I don't know. I mean, sometimes, I can look at it as a blessing that, I was able to see something like that, to verify something like that. But on the same note, I know there was a lot of things around me during that time, So anyway, when I came back, just, FYI, I did take care of things, when I was up there, and even when I came back, I had to do some things, and, things I think did pretty good, so I think I'm back on track, even though I'm still out there playing around with stuff I shouldn't be. But
Yeah, for the listeners, man, this is 100%. This is real stuff. These energies, these spirits, they can attach themselves to you, and you gotta take care of them to to get them off you. And so yeah, this is real stuff, and it really is horrifying. And yeah, I told a story. I think it was on episode 1 of Suspend Disbelief, where I went dancing at a powwow when we had a family friend. She died a couple months before that, and she wasn't blood related, but we still went and danced, and my regalia started falling apart 2 different times. I had the worst back pain of my life, and I ended up calling it quits after the second day. It was a 3-day powwow. I came home, I put my regalia in detached garage, similar to this, but a different one. And then that next morning, the very next morning, my regalia, which was in this bin, was just thrown around the room. And the door wasn't locked. Could have been an animal. Could have been a person that didn't steal anything. But sure enough, my regalia, my eagle fan, my gourd, my bandolier was just tossed around the floor. And I think that was it was some spirit that might have followed us from the powwow because we were dancing we shouldn't have danced. Um, but yeah, this stuff is really real, and it's impossible to truly understand. But what you really have to do is, just listen to your elders and listen to their experiences and what they were told growing up, and you know, smoke off.
yeah, I think another thing too, you know, a lot of these people, they go out and they do these things, and I'm not saying whether it's good or bad, or, you know, if you want to do it, I'm not saying don't do it, you know, but if you do it, definitely use your common sense. Your you know, if things don't look right and seem right or feel right, maybe, you know, you need to do something. You know, like on this incident, like I was saying, you know, I could have played, oh, that was just shadows, or it was this and it was that, or the electricity's flickering in my room. Maybe it's just you know, I could justify all that stuff. Yeah, I can make an excuse. But then again, I can also take care of it. What is it going to hurt for me to just do a little extra?
You know, that's a good point.
You know, and instead of me sitting there kind of justifying me not being afraid, you know, and that's what I would like to kind of, you know, put out across. You know, maybe you don't believe, I don't know, but regardless whether you believe or you don't believe, if this thing's going to be after you, it's going to get you. And whether you realize that or not, you can say, oh, I got hit by a car because I was just, you know, in the wrong place at the wrong time. But, you know, again, you know, negative things do happen to people, and some of it could be prevented, you know, without, you know, people sitting there trying to justify everything, or not trying to believe or not believe, you know. So I don't know. That's just my input, but, you
All
know.
right. Well, good insight, good advice. Very young elder of you. No, I'm just playing. Oh, man.
Dang.
No, I'm just busting your chops, man. All right. So I want to request some particular scary stories I've already heard you tell. But you know, if you guys want to hear some of his scariest stories, man, check out his podcast. Because he's got some good ones. One particular about Deer Woman, that man that had gave me the chills. The one when her face was started like, you know, shifting or
Yeah.
whatever. I was
Yeah.
like, yo.
You know, even on that podcast, I said, you know, every now and then I do dream of those things, and I do. You know, and to me, that's verification that that thing was real. You know, so again, you know, I know there's a lot of, you know, even like I was saying, you know, today I was at this conference, and you know, every time we took breaks, somebody had to come and tell me their eerie story. But this one young lady, she was a jingle dress dancer from up north, and you know, she's talking about, you know, her dances up that way, you know, and you know, she was telling me how sacred, you know, that jingle dress is to her people, you know, and you know, they have different, you know, dances for that, and they have actually ceremonies for that dance. You know, it's supposedly a healing dance, I guess you might say. You know, I'm not gonna repeat the story because I might not get it right. You know, but bottom line was, she was saying that this was a kind of a healing dance. You know, for an individual, and they were asked to do this dance. And she was saying, you know, her grandma, you know, told her that sometimes when you dance, you know, for an individual like this, you know, in that arena, you know, asking for, you know, this person to be healed in that certain way, there was a certain way of preparing yourself to getting ready, you know, and also preparing during that dance. And she was always told not to look at the crowd. She said to always, you know, look, you know, at the individual, or, you know, in the circle. Never look outside the circle. And she said, you know, of course, she was young. She didn't really comprehend. She didn't really understand. And when she did that dance, you know, she was looking out at the crowd, and she saw something that changed her life, that was in the crowd, and it followed her, and it, you know, it kept staring at her. And after that dance, you know, she didn't mention it to anyone, but she started seeing that thing on a regular basis.
No.
And you know, it got so bad, she was so terrified that she had to go see, you know, her elders and kind of spill the beans. Said, you know, during this thing, I wasn't doing what I was
Broke the
supposed
rules,
to,
yeah.
and of course they said, well, what you're seeing, needs to be taken care of immediately. And so, they took care of that. So, the reason she was telling me that story was I posted a story on Instagram. One of my brother-in-laws talked about that during the Osage dances, that those men dancers were told that. And that was her story to verify that, they used to say those things to those dancers in these ceremonial dances, that these evil things come around. And when she was telling me this, I could see the fear in her eyes. And the thing that she was telling me, you could hear her voice begin to tremble. That's how terrified she was. And to me, that story was just straight up eerie, So, there's things out there that, maybe, again, whether we believe or don't believe, it does happen.
I've got a story that my Segi, my uncle Frank, he's my dad's second or third cousin. I'm not exactly sure, but he's one of the few members of my family who dances in the Kiowa clan with us. And he loves scary stories, man. He's awesome. He tells some great scary stories, and every time I see him, I'm like, I want to hear some scary stories, and he'll just keep going. I'm like, yes, this is amazing. I'd love to get him on the podcast sometime, but he doesn't even know how to use a phone. So I'll have to go to him one of these days and just sit down at his house, or in his backyard, and hear some scary stories or something. But he's got some really good ones. But he was telling me a little bit about some medicine men uh, stories, and I'm not exactly sure. I'm going to get the names wrong on this, but when he was a kid, he would hear stories, and he's probably in his late 60s by now. So this must have been 50, 60 years ago when he was hearing some of these stories. But he was hearing stories from some of his cousins, and their dad, so one of his uncles, was a medicine man, and he had fascinating magic. And one of the stories he told me kind of blew my mind. And this is something I've never heard from anybody ever before. But one night they had to walk 15 miles to town, and dark, and it was cold, and they're out in the country, and he says, "Here, grab onto the back of my shirt." And this is to his kids, hold on to my shirt. We'll kind of train on each other. So you grab your shirt, and you'll grab your shirt, and you grab my shirt, and close your eyes. We're just gonna keep walking until we get to town. Close your eyes. And so they start walking, and within seconds they were in town. They had somehow just, maybe time was just disappeared. I don't know, or maybe he somehow transported them to town so they can go and get some supplies or whatever, and then they did the same thing to get back home in the country. And that was one of his tricks, one of his powers that he could do, was getting to places quick. And I've never heard that before, but I was like, yo, and I got the chills just telling that one right now, man. That got me, but I was like, yo, I was like, I've never heard of anything like that. But there's so much native medicine that, and stories like this that are going to disappear because we can't possibly fathom it. We can't possibly understand. And like now, everyone's got cars, so who's going to need magic to make that happen? You Uber to town. You know what I'm saying? So it's like there's that necessity that you were talking about, that people used to have to figure out with medicine. Good or bad, whatever. That is not a necessity anymore. So those tricks, man, that medicine is not necessarily around anymore. I'm sure there are people who still practice that type of stuff, but there's things that we can't possibly understand, and we'll never know.
You talked about, being modern day. One thing I really like, is to kind of hear these, I don't know how you say, haunted vehicle type stories.
Yes.
I told one, at
Yo.
Eufaula, there's a road, I don't know if I should say specifically where at, but I'll say it's between Newkirk and Stillwater. You know, up there by Ponca, and they had a elder Indian man. He was visiting family up there in that area. And, you know, this was a couple of years back. They said, you know, he was visiting and it was late at night. So he said, I'm going to go back. I'm going to drive back home to where he lives on this main road. It's, I think it's Highway 177. I think that's what they call it. And if you know that road, you know, it's pretty straight, but it does have curves, and it even has one stoplight on it that has a 4-way stop. And what happened was on his way, I guess from Newkirk back to wherever, somewhere in there, he wrecked right when he got close to Stillwater. He ran off the road and ran into something, and you know, of course, you know, they came and you know he was dead. But you know, they have that, I forget what they call those people that kind of can tell you what do they call it? Coroner, is that how you say it?
Yeah, who do like the autopsies and stuff?
Yeah, it does the autopsy.
Honestly, I'm not sure the name. That sounds about right. Yeah.
But anyway, well, they did an autopsy on him. Come find out he had a massive heart attack. But from his heart attack, they could tell he had been passed away for a long time before he even wrecked.
No.
And like I was telling you, that road has curves. You know, it's even got hills, and in one part it has a stoplight. So if he did die, you know, let's say even 30 minutes before he wrecked, I mean, he still had to. I don't know how his car didn't go off the road or swerve in the other lane, or you know, or even go through that stoplight, you know. So I don't know. There's a lot of things that haven't been explained on that story, but you know, the eerie thing about it, they still see that maroon car on 177 after midnight down that road every now and then.
Yeah. So that is that's very similar to a Stephen King book called Christine.
Yep.
And that's one of my favorite Stephen King stories, man. I love the movie, I love the book. But yeah, haunted car, you know, that it'll murder people, get its fix, you know, and its dings and dents and stuff like that will just repair themselves. It's pretty spooky.
They have a 1970, I don't know exactly when it was, but it was called The Car.
I did hear about that one. I haven't seen that one yet.
That happens in Navajo country.
Yo, for real?
And it's not a ghost that drives that. That's more of a demonic thing, because man, that thing can appear, and he got mad at this one lady and drove through her house and killed her. Yeah. So I mean, that's a pretty cool movie. But when I heard that story, I said, man, that is crazy.
Yeah, because I don't know if I've ever heard of a haunted car stories like that before. That's pretty spooky, man. Oh, yeah. So you had someone on your Instagram recently. I'm not sure which tribe he was, but he told his deer woman story. Man, that blew my mind. When he was a kid, and they're walking along that road, and there's this lady in a black veil.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
He had that picture on it too, man.
Oh, really? I missed the picture.
Yeah, you can see. You see this old Indian couple, and the guy's got his arm around her. And, you know, she's pretty, but you look at her feet and her hooves, and even her footprints in the snow are hooves. So I was like, man, that's crazy, man. Yeah. I mean, I get some pretty good stories, you know. I have to admit, you know, I've been lucky to hear. Even like today, like I was saying, the ones I could remember. I know I got much more because, like I said, we had a lot of breaks today, and man, everybody had
You're good, man. We'll get you back on the show. I mean, I'd love to come on your show too and just riff off of, you know, you boys, because man, you guys crack me up. But also, man, someone got to get in there and just what that actually knows what he's talking about. You guys, man, every time you're talking about movies, I'm like, man, these guys are killing me. They don't know nothing. No offense, guys, but I'm gonna do just a tiny little bit of research before your episode. No, I'm just playing. But you guys still crack me up sometimes, man. But yeah, I'd love to get on the show and just kind of, talk with you guys, hang out. That'd be a lot of fun. So one story, and this is I haven't told this on the show yet, but I have a video for this, and this isn't my story, but this is one of my best friends, Nathan, and his little brother Joseph. We go camping out near Carnegie, Oklahoma, and this is, as I've said before, it's like it's a hub for the paranormal. There are lots of DW sightings, as you guys call her. There's little people. There's the Koigato, which is Kiowa for the Wolfman or Skinwalker. There's Bigfoot sightings out there, UFO sightings. It's wild. I've even had my own peculiar UFO sighting out there that I can't explain. It's not a flying saucer by any means, but it's something in the sky that I was like, what in the world is that? So we're out camping for Memorial Day, and my Takoi friends, which is Kiowa for my white friends, we tell scary stories. We like to get spooked, kind of like we are right now, late at night. And there was this abandoned house down the road from where we go camping, and it's really spooky. And I took a picture of it before they stopped at this house because I drove by it and I just felt this weird feeling. So I stopped and I took a picture of it and I was like, man, this house is really spooky, very abandoned. Who knows how long it's been abandoned for, but it's out in Indian country. And out here on this land, by Cat Springs, where our family land is from, what it's called, like I said, lots of sightings. And even right before this, my Aunt Carol told me that Grandma Sue, her aunt, she lives out there on the land, and one of her white neighbors, is driving by in a truck, and he's like, so she walks over to the truck. She's like, "What's up?" And he's like, "I saw what looked like an Indian and loincloth and all, Indian garb, riding his horse down the road." Then I stopped and I turned around to look at him again. He was gone. I was like, yeah. And this is a white man telling that story, and he knew that she's Indian because there are lots of Indians out there, and and she really didn't know what to say to that except for that it was a ghost or an imprint of a Kiowa or an Indian warrior from hundreds of years ago or whatever. But this is out in that same land. And going back to our story, Nathan and Jojo, they're driving by this house, and this is during the daytime, but they drive by and they're like, hey, we should go check out that house. And so they pull up into the house, and Joseph, who's the younger brother, decides to run in and see, like, if there's anything crazy in there, because the front door is wide open, back door is wide open, all the windows are kind of open, and there are curtains just flowing with the wind. It's just really like spooky looking house. You drive by it, you get the chills because you're like, there's just something not right with that house. Well, they go into this house, and Joseph, he's walking around the house, and he just like gets this weird feeling. And just as he's about to go upstairs, because it's a two-story house, he stops, and then Nathan, the older brother, who is recording him going into this house because it's fun, whatever, they feel like they're ghost hunting or whatever. He gets a weird feeling too, and he's like, "Hey, Joe, come on outside." And so, Joe runs out the front door, and what you see is gonna freak you out, man. And this is the closest thing to ghost evidence that I have, and I don't have the full video. I'd love to get it. But here is the video, and this is in slow-mo. It's replayed back and forth, but you see Joe running out of the house, and that's what he looks like. He's a white guy. He's a normal person in a hat, and upstairs, what looks like a gray, which is a term commonly used for aliens. It looks out the window and it looks like, you see like somebody doing like this. And he swears this house looked completely abandoned. Is it possible somebody was living upstairs? Sure. My cousins have gone in there since because they saw this video and heard the story, and they wanted to see if there's anything, and there's no sign of anybody living up there, homeless person. And this is literally in the middle of nowhere. There's not homeless people out here because who are they gonna, beg off of? There's no one out there. But what looks like is a creature or a spirit in that top room looking out the window. I will say I have seen this full video, and there are old screens. And those old screens, they kind of blow with the wind. They're not like wire screens like we have now. And it looks like that's what's blowing in the wind. But from what it looks like is that something is peeking through the veil.
Dang.
You know what I mean? And like looking through that, and its impression is left in that screen. You know what I'm saying? But there's Joe downstairs coming out, and then upstairs it looks like somebody's going like this, looking out the window. And I showed this to my dad, and he was just like, "That's Indian country." He wasn't surprised at seeing anything like this. But I mean, this video's made its rounds, and everybody talks about it. And we bring it up every year, and they tell a story, and it's pretty fascinating. I like to get them, on the show just to come and tell their story. But they both had really weird feelings afterwards. They ended up like feeling sick, and they went home and missed the rest of the camp out before they even saw this video. They got home, and it was like the day later when they looked at the video and saw
Where was
that.
this supposed to be at?
Now this is in Carnegie. It's just south of Carnegie, between Carnegie and Apache. Yeah,
And it's still
it's still there.
It's still there.
Yeah, the house is still there. This was about maybe 3 years ago when this video was made.
Let's go right now.
That's what I'm saying. I'm trying to
go.
investigate.
I want to go right now.
Oh, it's about 2 hour drive from here, but
That's all right. No,
yeah.
that's all right. We'll get
But
there.
that's fascinating, isn't it? I'm telling you, this is
That is
unbelievable.
cool. That is so cool.
So I don't know, just from like how they tell the story and how like I don't know, the conviction that they have, like what they felt like when they left the house, and then later that night before they even saw this video and then slowed it down. Like to me, this is solid evidence of, some type of creature, some type of spirit that was haunting this house on this Indian land. Because man, that's spooky, huh?
Yeah.
And I've been wanting to show you this one for a while. I've been meaning to actually send you guys some stories on your show so you could tell them, but this is one thing I've been kind of keeping in my back pocket because I've been like wanting to tell it on the show. Because man, look at that! No chills, right? And of course, I'll put this in the link for you guys, or in the episode, so you guys can see it. So if you're listening, go to YouTube or Spotify, pull up the video, because what you're gonna see, man, is gonna give you nightmares. So I hope you're wearing your brown pants for this one, because you're gonna need them.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
That's a good one, huh?
I like seeing stuff like that, and I know a lot of people, they always say, well, I don't believe, and to me that's fine, whether you believe or don't believe or, whatever, I know myself, I've been in places like that and I've experienced things, and people always ask, even like today, everybody kept asking me, what's the spookiest place you've been to, or have you done this or have you done that? I've been to a lot of places, and the bottom line is I don't care where you go, there's probably a spirit there. And people always ask me, should I use some of my equipment in my own home? And I know a lot of people like to just test that stuff out, but to me, I wouldn't do it because that's where I live. That's where I want to go.
So do you feel like if you're testing your equipment, say like a spirit box or something like that in your house, that you might be inviting in some type of energy just by even messing with? Okay.
Yeah, sometimes, and that's what they used to say. If you run across something, on your own, you can get rid of it. You can, but now if you invite it in, that's where it can give you problems because it may not leave easy. It may want to stay, and it'll fight you. A lot of people won't tell you that. Even myself, I've been to places where I've gotten things following me back, and it wasn't easy to get rid of these things. And I hear like all these other ghost, ghost people. Even like that ghost adventure guy. He goes to the church now. He goes regularly.
Really?
And that's why he always sends that Aaron in there. But if I could get my crew to go with me, I'd be sending all three of them in there. But them guys always come out, oh, it's Sunday. No. It's 5 o'clock. I don't know. No, just teasing. But again, myself, I know a lot of people say, "Oh, can I use it at my home to see?" I said, "Well, it's up to you if you want to." I said, because just like when I was in San Diego, somebody asked me, she was telling me that she feels like there's something in her house. She wants to put up a camera. She wants to put an audio. I said, well, you can do all that, but you're just going to give it power because you're going to get scared of it. And if you give it fear, you're going to feed it. And I said, the best thing, if you feel like there's something there, you're probably right. I just go see somebody, have them take care of that, whether you do it the church way or you do it the ceremonial way. Either way, have it done. Don't play around with cameras, because again, you might see something that you can't handle, and it's really going to eat you up if you give it more power. So I don't know, that's my suggestion. When people ask me, well, should I do this, should I do that, I said, well, if you feel it, then it must be. So
Yeah, and I will argue the counterpart on that, and I do think it is important to kind of see things from all sides, is that you would want to test your equipment in a controlled environment, that being in a place where you're not necessarily investigating anything, but you want to see if you can get similar results on the field as in your house. And I'm not saying by trying to communicate with anything in your house, but say if you are in your house, if you're listening to a spirit box, then what you want to hear is you want to hear something that's more static, not something that's like communicating to you per se. But when you're out, as opposed to out in the field, when you do hear something that is coherent, that is communicating to you, responding to you. So where do you test that? Do you not test it except for just in the field? I think it's important to try to recreate evidence. So if you do try something out in the field, you should also try it in a controlled environment. Maybe not in your house per se, but somewhere else
go
where,
outside or the
yeah, go
garage.
outside, yeah, go do something, where you can see, like, if you communicate there, is it going to produce the exact same results? And I do think that investigating, especially with modern equipment, that you should have controlled experiments, where you're experimenting with your tools in other places, because there are so many gadgets now where where those ones that like you can even get close to when the lights start flickering, and I think all of that's cool and it's fascinating, but I'm like, how would that work anywhere? Would that exact same thing happen outside in my house? That's the only thing that like makes me feel like with ghost hunting shows that I can't necessarily subscribe to, but it's just because I haven't messed with it myself. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah, that's one thing, I always test out different equipment. When I do these, I always, if you see like me doing something live, I'll have different tools, whether it's an app or whether it's a recorder or whether it's a camera. Sometimes I'll use all of them, and sometimes I'll go to the old school type items, like your dowsing rods or your crystals or something, all that to me, if this crystal and this machine comes up with the same type of, then you're pretty much dead on the money. Not to say that happens all the time, because sometimes I've been in places where I've seen things, I've heard things, felt things, but I just couldn't never catch it on audio or video. And I was always told that that's just how those spirits are
Yeah,
sometimes.
absolutely. So from I guess necessarily my theory and what I've gathered from watching ghost hunting shows is that my dog's outside. Gah, scaring me. Is that ghosts can communicate to you in so many different ways, and it's never going to be in the exact same way. And one person, say one psychic or medium, is with another medium, they're not even going to infer the exact same message from a spirit, because maybe a spirit's only communicating to one of them and not both of them. They might not necessarily even be able to tell that something is there in the room. Um, so with ghost hunting equipment, it's easier for me to sort of suspend disbelief. I know this kind of contradicts what I was saying earlier, but I just would like to experiment with it more, and see from my own eyes like how this stuff works. Because like most ghost hunting shows, they don't show you doing it in a controlled environment. Like this is what this would do, in our studio or something like that. So I guess really like I just need to see for myself, and I really want to. I really want to get out in the field and experiment with some of these gadgets and see if we can communicate to some ghosts, some friendly ghosts, hopefully. You
Yeah,
know?
you that also the thing I always like to tell people too. You don't need all that equipment.
Yeah,
They always say we all have that ability. You've been in places where people don't get along. Something's just not right. You've been in places where you get that heebie-jeebie feeling. Or you go places where you're accepted. You got that good feeling.
yeah,
Or maybe you go to an area and you get all these different emotions like sadness or anger. You don't understand them. To me, that's all your, how they say it. That's
your intuition.
your third eye. They always
Yeah.
say that. I forget what they call it, your sixth sense. And they always said that everybody has that ability. Uh, when things like that happen. So, to me, you have to rely on yourself. Clear your mind when you go to these places. You know, use all your senses. Your sight, your smell, your taste, your hearing, your feeling. All those senses. Can help you. And I know a lot of people that say, well, sometimes he don't use nothing. When he goes in there, but sometimes you just don't. You don't need it.
And I'm more like that, and I hate just throwing up my phone and recording stuff, and I prefer just to more so be in the moment. And I regret that a lot of time because I'm like, man, I would like to revisit that and watch, what I saw or something like that. But yeah, I definitely like to just kind of be aware of all my surroundings and just like feel what's going on rather than just like, you know? But I don't
I've
know.
had many
There's
times
got to be a
where,
balance there, huh?
yeah, many times I've turned off my recorders or I wasn't even ready, and something happens, and then I'm just like kicking myself. I'm like, man, why didn't I do that? But anyway, it's always interesting, to go out there and the thing I like, is actually talking to them. And that's another thing, people sometimes something shows up, man, people go out the door. There's been many times I've been on ghost investigation. I've taken a whole crew with me, and then it's just two of us left, in there. And sometimes on these big investigations, you need a group of people, but sometimes to find that group, it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough. Everybody wants it until it gets real.
Yeah. Yeah, especially if you're out, midnight, staying until 3 a.m. trying to get some evidence or something like that. That's gotta be tough. And that's honest, honestly been the only thing that stopped me from ghost hunting so far is that it's just like, man, we gotta stay out that late. No, I'm just playing. But no, I definitely like it. I would like to get the skull crawlers out, and do some investigations and be serious about it, and try to communicate. And even for me, just experiencing it for myself, and just knowing that ghosts are real is, something that, I want. I don't. My goal isn't to catch anything on camera or anything like that per se. Like I just want to know for myself. I want to see a Bigfoot with my own eyes, even if no one else saw it. It would just like for me be like something that I could almost die happy knowing. It's like, man, I saw Bigfoot. I mean, same thing with ghosts. But that scares the crap out of me. So I don't know. I guess we'll see.
I just like to say something to
Yeah,
your
yeah, go ahead.
viewers. If you guys got a place, let us know. Contact him.
Absolutely.
Have him come out there. Check it out because I think I want to encourage these young guys to, they got a good show here.
Yeah.
And, sometimes you just got to go out there and just do it. So if you guys got a place for these guys to test their abilities, send it in. And also, if you don't mind, I'd like to go too.
Absolutely. Join us. We need some experience with this.
I'd like to go get spooked too.
Right.
I like getting spooked. So anyway, again, you guys down this way in Oklahoma City area, you guys got some place to visit, let us know. We'd like to come check it out.
Absolutely. And we've already got a handful of places in mind that we'd like to go investigate, So like now that the season's about to slow down for us and in the winter and stuff like that, maybe we'll get out and try to contact some ghosts. No, do something. But yeah, okay. So before we leave, do you have any last quick stories? At least one last quick story that you'd like to tell to give the audience the chills, anything like that?
Yeah, I'll tell a story. This is one that just kind of recently happened. Within the past couple months, again, I get blessed to go and attend some of these dances, these powwows, that's around here in Oklahoma, and we went to this one, and it was a good session, good singing. Had a lot of people show up, and and afterwards, we entered that drum contest. And anyway, make a long story short, it was afterwards, and it was just, we got Z'd out, didn't place or anything, but we didn't go there to win. We just went to sing. And so these group of guys that I was with, while everybody was packing up, we stayed out there, and we they wanted just to sing. They didn't feel like they got enough songs thrown their way, so they set up and they start singing. Before you know it, we was the only ones in this field where they had this dance. Well, of course everybody's gone, and then the lights went off, and these guys were still singing. And in the distance, way off, you could hear female singers in the distance. It was very low, and after that song ended, everybody was kind of looking at each other, and finally somebody said, "Did you hear that?" And of course one of the singers said, "Yeah, it sounded like women were singing. They were off in the distance." And they said, "Well, it might be a radio or somebody driving by." So it's y'all's imagination. Y'all getting spooked. Anyway, they start singing some more, and again you could hear it, and this time it sounded a little bit closer. It was closer, and these sound like several female singers. Some of them call them canaries, like that. And they sounded keen. Anyway, everybody was kind of looking at each other, and they started looking out into the dark. All those singers were still singing, but they was looking around their back, seeing who was out there. And these were just all dudes. And so, anyway, they finished that song, and everybody said, "Dang, we heard it again." And they said, "Oh, it's got to be, must be from the highway or some highway not too far. Probably people's driving by, or maybe it's a house, in the distance, maybe, playing that music, or maybe, something like that." So anyway, they started on their third song, and this time those voices were a lot louder, and they sounded like they were probably, I wouldn't even say 20 feet from us.
Oh my God.
And it was so loud. I mean, it shook everybody so much they just stopped in the middle of the song, and nobody said anything. Everybody just picked up their chair, their sticks, and that drum, and everybody was gone. We all took off, and sometimes I've heard stories like that. It's a single singer. They always say it might be a deer woman, but this wasn't one female. This was a whole bunch of them. and it wasn't like they were just in one area. It would sound like they were all around us. And you'll know that noise when those lady singers get behind you, like
absolutely.
that. And so, anyway, to me, that was pretty freaky.
That is freaky. Yeah, that's a spooky one. But yeah, powwows, man, especially powwows at night. There's just something extra scary about those, man. I'll tell you what. Uh, and okay, I'm going to tell a quick story before we end this. And this is going to be a Dear Woman story, DW story. Um, and this is a story that I heard from my Segi, my Uncle Frank. And he travels and goes to all different powwows from all around Oklahoma. But he was saying like, yeah, man, those Ponkas, they uh they had lots of sightings at Deer Woman. I'm like, for real? What do you know? And he's like, well, recently there was this story that and apparently at some of their powwows, they have someone checking feet when you're coming in. For some of these ladies, make sure she's not sneaking in, but sometimes, she still makes her way in somehow. But, there's a standard. They're dancing around this powwow, and then there's a bunch of people there, and this woman in this shawl. And what they do is people start realizing it, and they start pointing her out, and they all start like kind of gathering around her, and they're like, calling her out, dear woman. And apparently, that's one thing you can do to get her to go away is, call her out on her feet, and then she'll get scared or whatever, run away. And that's exactly what happened. And she took off and leapt over like this 10-foot wall and just like took off in front of everybody. I was like, yo, that's the scariest thing I've ever heard. It gives me the chills, man, even thinking about that. But that was a story he heard from some of his Ponca friends up there in Ponca City. And yeah, it just scares the crap out of me. And my dad told me he thinks that, every culture, all the people around the world, they have their own boogeyman. He thinks that, DW, he thinks that, she's our boogeyman. And we've heard the origins of her spirit and stuff like that. She's definitely what do they call them? A vengeful spirit. And yeah, I don't know, man. I definitely would consider her our boogeyman. That's a spooky one. So, but yeah, all right. Chris, would you like to plug yourself?
Yeah, you can find me on Christopher Honkv Hill on Instagram and TikTok, but you can also find our spooky podcast on Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservation.
Yeah.
It's on every format out there, so just check it out.
Yeah, all right. Um, and that's Chris Honkv Hill, guys. We've been trying to get him on the show since, our first episode, and he's been one of my bigger inspirations for our show because he's got the scariest stories, man. So I'm honored to have him on the show. Oren, I wish you could be here. For listeners, I forgot to mention this earlier. This was the kind of a last second podcast. Oren couldn't make it. Chris was in town. I was like, dude, get over here. I'm gonna have you on the show. It's almost midnight right now. We're telling some scary stories to each other. So I'm honored he's here. I'm glad he stopped by to step in and tell some stories. And yeah, thanks for listening. And you can find us on Instagram at Skullcrawlers, Twitter _Skullcrawlers, and on YouTube at the Skullcrawlers. And it should be pretty easy to find. Skullcrawlers Movie Club, Skullcrawlers Horror. We just released a new horror short film, and it's really good. I'm actually really impressed with how it turned out. We had a great reception, a great Halloween season, great Halloween movie night, Elk Valley Brewery.
These guys are awesome. You guys got to check them out, share it with all your friends.
Hey, I appreciate that.
It's awesome.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. So yeah, we're out here, man. We're natives telling stories through film and through this podcast, and just we're having a good time. So thanks for coming on, Chris, and everybody listening. Sleep with one eye open, and thanks for wearing your brown pants. See ya.
No.